Well, there's a great treat coming up for people in the Eastern Sierra. Local writer-photographer Andy Selters will present Mountains of the Blue Sheep. This is described as a multimedia documentary, a journey beyond the Himalaya. And that'll be taking place this Saturday at Edison Theater in Mammoth Lakes. And then again Saturday, January 19th at the Inyo Council for the Arts in Bishop. We were lucky enough to be able to talk to Andy Selters about his adventure and his presentation. Andy, sounds like we got quite the spectacular show coming up over the next couple of weekends. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
Well, the trip was really spectacular for me. This was I was fortunate to be asked to go on a trip into this very, very remote part of northernmost India, where I actually been interested to go there 30 years back, and when I was just out of college, and it was prohibited for a long time. And this was an area that huge, big mountains, big glaciers, and villages too, where basically they're inaccessible and prohibited because the area is disputed between India, China, and Pakistan. It's so remote and rugged that people, that countries didn't really claim it until relatively recently, and they've been at war actually. So here's India finally has enough, feels comfortable enough to let expeditions like us in, and so we were a specially authorized trip to go in. And we knew nothing about the area except the rough map that said the peaks were about 20,000 feet high. And there was a village there that supposedly had never been visited by foreigners, and so basically that's all we knew. And so these Canadian friends and I that I'd climbed with before, they invited me, and off we go. And it actually turned out, the terrain turned out to be spectacular, but pretty easy to get around in. It ended up being a great trip. That's the basic.
And you bagged a few peaks, it sounds like.
Yeah,
and named them.
Yeah. The peaks were unnamed, of course, and we've been told by regional experts they've never even been photographed or almost even seen before from the ground.
What do you got in store for everybody on your show?
Well, out of what, almost 3,000 pictures I took. I mean, yeah. Well, that's the way it goes, with the digital cameras now. But I pulled out not quite 300 of them and played it into audio that I recorded. And then I have my own narration and tell the story basically. The show, it's about an hour, and I have three parts. The introduction, the history of this area is kind of amazing. How it was so far away from everything, and then all of a sudden became a war zone. From wilderness that nobody even knew about into a war zone is pretty unique, and so I like to tell that story. And then here's these villages that they've been at peace for ages, forever, and so a little bit of the history there and culture I think is really interesting. And then the climbing and our exploring and figuring out what the peaks are, where we can climb and all that. And that was fun. We had pretty good weather, and working with the locals and then Canadians. It was all fun actually. And then I stayed on, after my Canadian friends left, I stayed on in this village for an extra week and a half, and helped out with the harvest. I really wanted to, this is a vanishing way of life. There's not that many villages that would be in this position of almost entirely traditional way of life. And so I stayed on there for a while and helped out with their harvest, and they were incredibly generous, friendly, and the language was a struggle, but it was really worth it. I had a little phrase book, and so that's how the story culminates, is how I interacted and lived with these people for a little while.
And you've done a lot of things interesting, obviously, in your life. How does this rate? Do you ever do anything like that and say, wow? Well,
it rates really high, I guess, in terms of how it affected me and how I guess the significance of it. It's very rare, of course, to be able to explore new terrain. Just that alone, just the amount of unknown, and to have it turn out pretty positive, that's great. And in terms of like climbing difficulty, people ask about that. Well, yeah, it's never that easy to go over to 21,000 feet or so, but I never felt stressed in climbing ways, or the safety was no more of an issue than here in the Sierra, really. And so if you're looking for a really hardcore climbing trip, those days for me are over. But the climbing was great. In terms of the cultural sort of distance from where, you know, we know here it was, I'm still kind of processing, but it was one of the best trips I've ever been on, and I intend to go back, possibly to maybe lead a group up to, there's other 20,000 foot peaks around there that could be done. So that's a possibility for the future.
All right, cool. And you know, you said your climbing days are done. I was wondering if you met somebody at a party who, gosh, didn't know you, well, what would you describe yourself as?
Somebody who's going to go climbing with me?
Or a photographer or adventurer?
Yeah, you know, every month I kind of wear a different hat. But, you know, it's kind of the way it works here in the East Side, I think, a bit. You have different jobs. And, you know, I really, I guess the first thing I would say is my first role in society, I feel like, is passing on the photography and stories. You know, I've done history, I've done historical work with the museum and historical books. So the writing and the photography to me all come together, and you know, if I could, I'm working to focus on that entirely, but I also, you know, I also teach fitness. I teach Tai Chi and Chi running here in town, and so yeah, I really enjoy working with people in that way. So you know, having a balanced life seemed like really important to me, and I like to keep my options open, but follow my passions. And you know, so far so good, plugging along that way still.
All right, cool. And have you gotten much feedback about the shows coming up? I've already heard a few people saying they're really looking forward to it.
Well, you know, the people I know, I've told them, I said, this was one of the best trips I've ever done, and the experiences I had really affected me. And so if that word's gotten around, that's great. And yeah, I was pleased with the photographs. And so if you know, people have seen my work before, this is right up there with anything I've done. So yeah, I look forward to passing the messages on I learned and the stories. And so sure, come on out, and we'll both coming up Saturday and the next Saturday after that.
Great. Andy, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Should be very interesting with Andy Selters. And again, that's this Saturday in Mammoth and January 19th in Bishop. Promising to be a very cool presentation, just $10. And if you would like to get some more information, you can check out the website, andyselters.com. We'll be back with weather and sports.